Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee meeting for May 13th, 2024. Our first order of business tonight is approval of the agenda. Did anyone have any changes or additions? All right, seeing none, we can move ahead to our next item, which is approval of the April 22nd, 2024 committee meeting minutes. If there are no changes or additions, seeing none, I entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Carter, seconded by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the minutes are adopted. And now I will turn it to MTS Director Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, council members. Recognizing a very long agenda of business items in front of you tonight, I did not prepare a specific report. There are many items underway between the TPP, the regional solicitation, work at the legislature, and the work of the TAB. So I would be happy to answer any questions on anything that's in progress, but don't have a specific report tonight.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? And with our long agenda, the good news is this is also so we can have Memorial Day off. So. All right, and now we will turn to Metro Transit General Manager Canderas.
Chair Barber, council members, much like Director Carlson, I don't have a formal report for you, but I wanted to just thank you for your engagement with us on the May 1st Committee of the Whole meeting, where we provided our quarterly safety and security action plan update. We sent you some follow-up information last week in case it's useful for you as you're having conversations in your districts or in other venues. And I also want to mention, since that Committee of the Whole, we continue to build up our transit rider investment program. We had 5 new agents start last week, so we now have 23 covering 2 shifts starting at 6 a.m. going till 10 p.m. every day. So we continue to hire our management for that program and look to start hiring our own staff to do that program in the coming weeks. So more to come, but just wanted to flag that we continue to make progress on that and really appreciated the conversation at the Committee of the Whole earlier this month.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, we do not have a TAC report tonight, so we can go on to the consent agenda. There's one item on consent, so I'd entertain a motion to approve the item on consent.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Tyrone Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the consent item is adopted. And on to non-consent business. Our first business item is business number 2024-124, which is Priscilla's contract amendment. We have Leslie Stick to present. It was close.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Leslie Stite, and I am the Technology Manager for MTS Fleet. Today, I present for your approval a request for additional funding of $3.2 million in support of an existing contract with our contracted repair and installation technician team, Priscilla's. Priscilla's is a Metropolitan Council underutilized business, which has been an excellent service provider for our onboard technology. During COVID, bus manufacturing came to a halt, and we were not able to replace vehicles for nearly 4 consecutive years. In late 2023, we started to see manufacturing begin with a small trickle of replacement vehicles. In 2024, the manufacturers moved our vehicle manufacturing up to an escalated timeframe. In that 2024 timeframe, so in 2023, we received that small trickle, and that was about 125 vehicles. In 2024, we are expecting and have on board another 181 vehicles. In 2025, we're expecting 371 vehicles. While we're excited to have these new vehicles, we need additional technology installers to keep up with the pace and to be able to put these vehicles into service to replace the aging and failing vehicles. The additional funds requested will pay for the work that is all part of the original scope of work in the contract, which expires September 30th of 2025. By approving this action, it will allow us to increase the new bus technology installations, update fleet in service, and assist the council in our increase of NCUB spending. Important points. This project is locally funded and the DBE goals do not apply. Priscillis is an MCUB with a 100% participation, and no goal was applied to their MCUB contract. I would like to thank you for your time. The proposed action, just to read the little quip of what we're talking about, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute an amendment for contract 19P383A with Priscillis Technology Incorporated to provide contracted maintenance, installation, decommission, and repair services of fleet equipment for an additional $3.2 million with a cumulative not-to-exceed contract amount of $9.244 million. Thank you, and I will take questions.
Very good, thank you. Questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-124.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Chambliss, second by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Now we're on to two Green Line items, business item 2024-103 and 2024-105, and we have Jim Alexander here. Welcome.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair, council members. So this first item is 2024-103, relates to rail term contract 18P402. This contract provides rail dispatch services for us on the Bass Lake Spur, which runs alongside the Green Line extension in St. Louis Park and Hopkins, and ventures on out to Minnetonka. The reason why we have this contract is we're required to have, we provide dispatch services through our agreements with TC&W. We have a construction agreement and a co-location agreement with TC&W, and so this is a requirement of that. This contract currently runs through June 30, 2024, and so we need to continue this service during construction. And I'll advise we also need to have dispatch service as we get into rail, into operations on the Green Line extension. What we're proposing tonight is to amend the contract to take us through the end of June of 25 to add just under $100,000 to a total of not to exceed amount of $568,722. And at that time, as we get into 25, we'll be looking at our options for the rail dispatching. We wanted to have a little time to work that out with our risk department. We're looking at, this gets coupled in with our insurance requirements we're going to acquire for testing and ultimate operation of Green Line extension. So with that, Madam Chair, proposing that that you all consider the council authorize the regional administrator to execute amendment number 4 to the contract 18P402 with rail term for freight rail dispatch services to add $98,732 for a total contract value not to exceed $568,722.32. That all stand for any questions.
Good, thank you. Questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-103.
I make a motion.
Moved by Councilmember Tyrone Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the second item, 2024-105, this relates to Aldridge Parsons Joint Venture, APJV. They're our systems contractor on the Green Line extension. We have been before you a number of times on this, actually 2 previous Part 1 change orders. This is a Part 2 change order, which really concludes the negotiations and settlement of the claim amount that the contractor had for an extension of time to the contract that was caused by delays to the civil construction contract. Now, these are issues we've talked about up through 2021, where we added 34.5 months to the civil contract, and we had subsequent delay on the systems contract. And so we've been working very closely with our expert consultants and our outside counsel, Venable, the outside counsel, and the consultants, Whiffley and Tronner, helping us navigate to get to a fair and reasonable price. And you may recall that the contractor had originally slated about a $64 million cap for this, and we will land, assuming we get approval for this, at just over $43 million for that. So that's 43 compares to that 64 million. And this is all within our estimated project budget of $2.86 billion. And coupled with this is, like we've done before on the Part 1 change orders, is we're also looking for an increase in the cumulative change order authority. Per council policy, once you award a civil or a construction contract, you generally have a 10% of change order authority for that contract. When you go above that, we have to get council approval. And so we're asking to bring this back to the 10% amount. Do have a table that has a bunch of numbers in there, but essentially we're looking to add additional cumulative authority to get us back to that 10% authority that we started out with the contract. And so that would get us to add 14.6% or 28.5 million to get us to that final balance, assuming the Part 2 does get approved, that we would be back to 19.4 million and 10% of the cumulative authority. So, Madam Chair, we are seeking authorization for the regional administrator as part of the system schedule cost claims process to negotiate and execute Part 2 change order for contract 17P000 with APJV in the amount not to exceed $43,315,177 for claims, resolution costs associated with the extension of time to the contract, and also to authorize an additional $28.5 million to get us to that $19.4 million or 10% of the original contract amount.
Very good. Thank you, Jim. Questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-105.
Make a motion.
Moved by Councilmember Morales, seconded by Councilmember Tyrone Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Jim. All right, next we're on to two business items, business item 2024-108 and 2024-113. Our Hastus 2024 upgrade. We have Sue Higgy and Michael Hushert, and you can fix any slaughtering of your names that I did. So.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. I'm Mike Hoikert, and I'm going to start out the presentation with discussing Hastus a little bit, and then Sue will talk about our license and maintenance agreement. So Hastus is our bus and rail operations scheduling system. We've got three departments that use it pretty heavily. We've got service development, bus and rail operations, and also payroll. So service development works on the big picture. They create the schedules, break them down into manageable pieces that we can assign resources to. So they say what the piece will be for a block for the bus, what the bus will do in a day, what an employee and operator will do in a day. They send it on to operations who take that and assign operators to it. They let them pick their work. And then on the daily schedules, dispatchers are looking through and finding all the open work for people who may be on vacation or may be sick and making sure everything's assigned and assigning buses to them so that everything gets out on the road on time. And then once that daily schedule is done, that goes on to payroll so payroll can pay them, make sure that they come back in 2 weeks to keep doing it again. So as part of this upgrade, we have a couple timeline issues that we're working with. So we need to update our infrastructure. Right now we have Oracle, which is reaching its end of life. That's what Hastus is hosted on. We have just under 2 years to make sure that we figure out a new place for it to be hosted, or they will no longer support our Oracle system. So the upgrade is going to take about 18 months to do. So we should have just enough time to get that completed. We also have the current maintenance agreement, which expired yesterday. So the company, Giro, has said that they will work in good faith to continue to support our system, but we need to continue working towards getting a new agreement in place with them. And procurement has been working with us to make sure that there's some sort of agreement in the meantime. So There are also several benefits to this upgrade, other than the absolutely necessary part of it. The upgrades are that we're upgrading to a 2024 system. So currently we have 2014, so it's a 10-year newer program. User experience is going to be much better than the previous version. It also includes electric bus scheduling, so it will take into account charge times for the buses. It'll take into account range of what an electric bus can do in a day. And then we're also including a couple new modules. So there's a self-service module, which will provide operators access to their profile. They can look at payroll reports, and they can put in their overtime preferences. It also has their daily assignment, which that's currently done through email. Some of these other features, they have to go through their manager to do, so it'll make it easier for them to access. And then BidWeb is the big one for convenience for our operators. That allows them to pick their work and time off from home or any location with web access. Right now, when they go in for their quarterly pick, they go into a room full of bulletin boards and their schedules posted up all over the walls. So they go through the schedules and pick the work they want. Now they're going to be able to log into a computer, scroll through the schedules that are available, and do it from home. They don't have to come in at 4:30 in the morning to start picking their work. There are a couple risks involved in this. Just the complexity of this is a pretty integral part of our system. There are a lot of other programs connected to it, receiving data from it. We have to make sure that all of that continues. And like I mentioned before, there is a timeline where we need to get it started soon and have it done before that 2-year end-of-life cycle for Oracle. And it's going to take a significant amount of IS resources to make sure that we do get it integrated correctly. The cost for this is not to exceed $1,704,529. Funding for the HASTA software upgrade is available, and it has been approved through the capital budget.
All right, thank you. So Michael just described the benefits of upgrading to the newest version of HASTAS. But in order to move forward with the upgrade, we have to have a licensing and support agreement in place. And so we have an agreement. It's a 4-year contract with an optional 5th year. And the contract actually does 2 different things. The first thing it does is it's license the software. So there's 11 different modules, and Michael talked about 2 of them being brand new and creating a lot of new great functionality for our employees, so we're looking forward to that. And the second thing it does is provide the maintenance and support, and what that means is what happens if the system isn't working? What kind of support are we going to get from Giroux? And so this is all now laid out in the new maintenance and support agreement. And I want to say just a little bit about what does it take to maintain a system like a critical system like HASTAS. So it takes a large team of internal people, both IS and people from the business. And when there is a problem with the system, the first level of troubleshooting is information services, and it takes a lot of different kinds of skill sets to be able to support a system like this. It takes application developers, network infrastructure, and data engineers to keep the system running every day. And like I said before, we work really closely with people like Michael and his team. But if we can't fix it, when it first comes to us, then we have to reach out to Giroux, and that's why we need this agreement in place. And so we open a ticket with them, and in this new agreement, there's service level targets that they're gonna have to meet. So it will be very important for us to manage this vendor to make sure that they're keeping on track with their service level agreement. Now this agreement, there's a lot of benefits to this agreement. And so the biggest benefit is they've expanded their support to 24/7. I mean, it's hard to believe, but they didn't have this before. Their support before was Monday through Friday, basically office hours. So if we had a problem after 5, we had to wait till the next morning to get support. So this is like a big deal. This is it's really expanded support for us. And we actually have a service level agreement in the contract. Never had that before, so that's new as well. So this will be really, really good for us. They also have a new web portal that we will use to track tickets and be able to track the status, because before we had to do it with emails, which was cumbersome. Another part of this agreement is we actually have modification days. And what this means is we get 20 days of basically developer support if we need them to modify our system. We actually have a lot of modifications to the system, primarily because of the ATU contract. With all the different union rules, especially with payroll, we do have to modify it. It's common, so we have to write that in to the agreement in order to do that. And another item is Giroux has an exact copy of our version at their site. And what that means is they have our version with all our modifications at their site. So when there's a problem, we can reach out to them. One other item is it includes new releases at no additional fees. This is very standard in most contracts. What that means is if they come out with like another patch or small upgrade, that's included during the life of the contract. Cost. So over the 4 years of this agreement, the cost is $1.8 million. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is that 10.7% increase. And first thing that I need you to know is that this is not an apples to apples comparison to what we had before. This is a completely new agreement. And like I talked about before, it's 10-year newer technology, brand new version, and we've added new functionality. So every time you add a new module or new piece of software to a system, you're going to have to pay more money. The other thing I talked about was the expanded support, whereas before we had, just like during the day support, now we have 24/7. That's a big expanded capacity, so we're paying for that. The other thing is the service level agreements actually laid out in the contract. And one thing I want to say about this contract overall is that we did extremely well in negotiating this contract. Now, historically, if we look at just increases in software before COVID, the average increase of software is about 3 to 6%. That's what we kind of saw across the board. And that's sort of when you're comparing apples to apples from contract to contract. What we are seeing, and Gardner says this as well, starting in 2022, kind of post-COVID, because of having to pay people higher wages and because of inflation, instead of the 3 or 6% we were getting before COVID, now the average increases are about 6 to 10%. And we're seeing that as well. And so overall, what we're able to do is in the second year, we got them down to just a 4% increase, and even lower than that in years 3 and 4, 3.5, 3.5. So we really did well overall for this contract. So our proposed action.
So we propose that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute a sole source contract 23P243 with Giroux, an amount not to exceed $1,704,529 to upgrade Metro Transit's bus and rail scheduling and operations software system from Hastus version 2014 to Hastus version 2024.
And also, that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute a sole source contract numbered 23P362 with Giroux to provide Hastus software license and maintenance agreement in an amount not to exceed $2.5 million.
Good, thank you. And we will take each vote separately, but we can ask questions. So are there questions or comments? No? Councilmember Carter.
Comment, no small deal, clearly. And I was very, very surprised to hear that there was just regular hours support in the last contract. So I'm very, very glad to hear that you have the 24/7 support in this contract. I was wondering, because this is a sole source contract, and I didn't key in right away at the beginning, whether you talked about what the market is like for this kind of software and support. Also thankful that we do have backup. That was a part of my question. I'm sure we have some backup here. And then also that it is at Hastas that they are able to, or Giro, or, I'm sorry, can't remember the name of the company that the Hastas software is also backed up there. So the question is, what's the market like for this? And I understand the upgrade and the capacity to remain with the company, but what do we see in the industry where this software is concerned?
Chair Barber, Councilmember Carter. Well, Hastas is a proprietary system, so any maintenance has to come from them. As far as other systems being available, we do work closely with Transit Master, which provides a similar system. We use them for another part of our daily operations. What we have heard from them is that hearing from them and hearing from other people who have used them, the transition from Hastas to Transit Master for this does not typically go smoothly. It is a pretty significant disruption. It's also not as flexible or customizable as Hastas has been for us. And we have done a significant amount of customization to the current Hastas in order to make it work for us.
So it's just those two in the industry?
I can share, Councilmember, one thing I want to add to that is from a market perspective, these types of software, this is a niche, right? So there's not a lot of software vendors that offers this particular kind of functionality out there. So it's like a small market of just a few players out there in the market. And so that's another one of the reasons why it's a sole source is not a lot out there. We did look at others, and this is so integrated with so many other systems that we have that it just makes sense to stay with Hastas.
I understand, and thank you very much.
All right, any additional questions and comments? I would just say nice work, and I think this is just hearing the improved functionality, though sounds like what will be greatly improved ease of use for our operations and our operators to be able to see things and put everything out, because I know a lot of it is manual, and to date. And so really seeing great opportunity for efficiency and also the improvement in how we've structured out the service agreement, I think is just very great news. So if there are no other questions or comments, we'll take a vote on the first one, which is the business item 2024-108. So it's the Hastas 2024 upgrade. I'd entertain a motion to approve the business item.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Carter, seconded by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. And the second one, which is business item 2024-113, which is the Hastas licensing and support agreement. I'd entertain a motion to approve the business item.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Michael and Sue. Now we're on to business item 2024-87, which is the City of Minneapolis Transit Advantage Master Funding Agreement. And we have Derek Berube and Michael Mecklenburg here to present.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Before we talk about the agreement, I just want to provide a quick overview of our speed and reliability program. This was initiated back in 2018 with a goal of improving the rider experience on those high ridership local bus routes, in particular those that aren't already programmed for BRT improvements. We're doing this through reducing travel times and improving the reliability of service through a series of transit advantages. This has been really important work and I think well received by our riders. And in fact, our team has recently expanded back in late last year with 2 additional team members. We now have Ryan Heath, who, in addition to focusing on transitway planning, is also our lead on transit signal priority and other signal work. And Michaela Ahern is new to the team. She'll be leading a second Better Bus Route project each year, and we'll be doing spot improvements. A recent task that this team took on was to convene a committee with our regional partners to discuss transit advantages, in particular transit signal priority, or TSP. TSP is one area that gets technical very quickly and really requires close partnership with the roadway authority to make it work smoothly. Through this process, we identified around 15 areas that we thought could use some improvement. And I'm happy to say that we're already starting to check those off the list. One of those has been accomplished, and we're well underway with some of the other items. This group met monthly late last year and into this year, and I'm happy to say that we are continuing to meet with them, if not monthly, but now quarterly with that same group, so we can continue the conversation going forward. If you want more information about the legislative report, there's a link there, or we'd be happy to come back at a future meeting and talk about it in more detail.
Thanks, Michael, Madam Chair, and committee members. My name is Derek Burby, working with engineering and facilities at Metro Transit. And this agreement that we're working on here does a lot with collaboration between ourselves at Metro Transit and the city of Minneapolis. But I also want to make sure it's known that there's a lot of collaboration within Metro Transit internally between the Speed and Reliability Group, Service Development, and us in engineering and facilities to really deliver these projects that our riders see as a major advantage on their daily commutes and getting around our city. So there's a few things I wanted to outline here that we as a group wanted to outline that this agreement will do, but also what it won't do during its 5-year duration. Things that it will do is it offers an opportunity to have easier exchange of funds between our projects with the city of Minneapolis and all these different transit advantages projects. It also defines some of the cost sharing splits, and the next slide will show a brief overview of what we're looking at currently as part of that cost sharing. But one of the really important things is solidifies our relationship with the city of Minneapolis and Metro Transit to improve transit. Things that it does not do, it does not commit Metro Transit to any specific projects or any funding amounts. It doesn't apply to any projects beyond the city of Minneapolis and only on Minneapolis-owned roadways. And it does not replace any capital agreements for transitway projects. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, this largely formalizes what we are currently doing in existing responsibilities, but it really gives us a mechanism to more quickly execute projects with the city of Minneapolis. So on this slide here, you can see some of the higher level view of the installation percentages, costs upfront, as well as the maintenance costs through the duration of the life of these projects. And lastly, for myself in these slides, I wanted to touch base on a few upcoming projects that we have planned that we're hopeful will be some of the first ones that we roll out as part of this master funding agreement. One of them is a Hennepin-Lyndale bus lane project that will be vital to our bus operations, connecting uptown to downtown Minneapolis with some new red paint, signage, and striping installations. And also many different Better Bus Routes projects that have a lot of work, again, with striping, signage changes, and things like that. I'll go back to Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. The final slide here, bus lanes. So the agreement covers a wide variety of project types, but bus lanes is maybe the highest profile of these. So I just wanted to touch on this again of why we feel like it's a valuable investment. So bus lanes provide a pretty big advantage by allowing the bus to bypass traffic congestion. So you avoid conflicts with other vehicles and a common mixed traffic environment. Specifically with red paint, this is, again, a big investment, but it's really shown to pay off. Other regions, when they've looked at it, they've seen about a 40 to 70% reduction in bus lane violations on lanes that were painted red. The red paint also does highlight the prominence of transit in a corridor. It really makes drivers and riders aware that this is a premier transit corridor. And it provides a more premium feel for riders. So as you're bypassing stopped cars, you benefit from that transit advantage. The results of our existing bus lanes have all been very positive, and this is a network that is really starting to take off. We have recently added 2 bus lanes on Hennepin Avenue a few years ago, 7th Street downtown. Back in 2022, Lake Street is now a big expansion of bus lanes. And these have all been very successful for us. I would say their bigger benefit, they do improve the speed of service, which is great, that consistency. But I feel like their bigger benefit is the reliability factor. So on days where there's bad weather or there's traffic congestion or there's other road delays, when you're driving in a bus lane, you can avoid all that. So again, we feel like it's a very worthwhile investment. And we are, I think, pretty aggressively expanding the bus lane network here in the region. So with that, our proposed action today is that the Met Council authorize the regional administrator to execute a master funding agreement with the city of Minneapolis to facilitate cost sharing between agencies on transit advantage projects. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Very good, thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for this presentation. Back on slide 4, where you outlined the 3 points that the master funding agreement doesn't do, is the reason for those not doing those 3 things the result of negotiating with Minneapolis or the result of limitations by the legislature?
Madam Chair, Council Member, I think there are different answers for each of these. So the agreement is really just a framework for exchanging funds. So we have a few projects in the pipeline, again, that Derek mentioned that we anticipate this agreement will utilize. But it doesn't commit us to future projects. We certainly think that there will be future projects. Okay. In terms of the other items, this agreement is just with the city of Minneapolis. We feel like it could be a template for other cities and Hennepin County. And we had at one point thought about including Hennepin County in this agreement, but we wanted to take it one step at a time. So we have this agreement with Minneapolis that we hope can be kind of a good starting point for future agreements. And then finally, for capital agreements, I think this is just an acknowledgement. There are other projects, BRT projects, other rail transitway projects. This isn't meant to be so widely encompassing. This is, I would say, more specifically for transit advantage projects within our program.
Councilmember Vento.
This is going to sound like a really strange question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because that's my MO. I live in the East Metro area, and particularly on every other Monday from July until December, when I go to our transportation committee meetings over at the Haywood Center, I will more often than not go through downtown Minneapolis because avoiding the tunnel just allows me to breathe better. Mm-hmm. However, driving down through Minneapolis and hitting one of those bus lanes has more than once kind of freaked me out. Is there a way of, for those of us who don't regularly drive in downtown Minneapolis, forewarning us of bus lanes so that we're not all of a sudden finding ourselves driving on red cement or, markings that tell us that we're in the wrong lane? It's happened to me more than once, and I keep waiting to get pulled over and ticketed. So far, it hasn't happened, and I've kind of learned my lesson, but I'm probably going to have to go out and practice before July 1st so that, I can get to these meetings. Yeah. But I'm just kind of concerned about that. For those of us who aren't frequenting Minneapolis and or for those who just don't drive downtown very much, it's a concern.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Vento, that's good feedback. We work with our city partners on the signage and striping plans. Typically there are signs both on the curbside, sometimes overhead, and as you noted, on the street itself. Again, that's good feedback. I can take it back to the team as we're planning future bus lanes to maybe have that signage visible earlier as you're approaching the corridor.
And Madam Chair, if I could, even, and just so that the lanes kind of align, so that I know I've got to move over. You run into it occasionally here in downtown St. Paul, particularly during road construction, street construction season, which we're in the thick of right now. And it just throws folks. And I think it contributes to accidents and just, unintended consequences as a result.
Yeah. Madam Chair and Councilmember, I guess I'll just add that it isn't desirable to have a bus lane just start sort of in the middle of a corridor. So 7th Street is an example of where that does happen. I think ideally, we would like to have it start further east. So right as you're getting off the ramp, you'd be directed over. On the example that we talked about earlier, Hennepin-Lyndale, those bus lanes will actually be starting only where there's a lane addition. So you wouldn't find yourself in that same situation. And it does vary by corridor, but again, good feedback.
I know we've got a lot more to plow through, but I just have to ask one more question. Is the bus lane on Lyndale, the bus lane that we heard about from local business owners several meetings ago in a public comment period, does anybody know? Loss of parking?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilmember. Yeah, I did listen in on that meeting. That's actually, as Chair Zelli pointed out, that was a county-led project, the Lyndale Avenue South reconstruction.
Okay.
So that's from Franklin down to 31st, so in the uptown area. That is not one of the projects that we're talking about today.
Very good.
That said, we are going to be working with the county on looking at bus lanes in particular areas of that corridor.
Well, just as a final point, I would just ask that we do whatever we can to work with those businesses. Loss of business isn't good for bus routes. It's not good for the community. It's not good for the local economy and for the families and business owners that want to thrive there. So, thank you.
Councilmember Cameron?
Thank you. So mine is a more basic question of how are transit advantage projects defined broadly and then within the scope of this agreement, so that we understand how future projects and future funding for projects might occur.
Sure, Madam Chair, Councilmember. I mean, the industry uses this term rather broadly. So that could be one of many different things: off-board fare payment, wider stop spacing. We talked about bus lanes, transit signal priority. We've tried to throw a pretty wide net when it comes to this agreement so that if we come up with an idea later, it will be sort of captured by this agreement. In our region, we've done all of those and more. I guess I would maybe also add, I mentioned TSP stop. Yeah, so a lot of those items that you see on a BRT route, fairly broad term.
Go ahead, Councilmember Cameron.
I guess my question is, how do we make sure that we are, with that broad scope, we're including a lot, which lends towards the ease of use of these funds, but then how do we make sure that there's not a creep of scope within this master funding agreement to other areas, let's say, where we would want to make sure that we are exercising the appropriate amount of authority over those projects?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, that's a great question. I mean, even within this agreement, each future project will have a subordinate funding agreement that we'll work on with the city of Minneapolis. Again, our goal is really to focus on improving transit service for local bus riders. So from what I do, I'm keeping the scope fairly narrow. I don't know, Derek, do you have any other?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Councilmember, I think the big thing with that is understanding that we'll be the ones driving these improvements. When I say we, more Michael and his team in service development, and really guiding these projects that help what we want to do in Metro Transit's advantages throughout our corridor. So that's where a lot of that will happen.
And Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. I have the same sentiments as Councilmember Vento. with regard to the dedicated bus lanes and working with the businesses that might have been using that for parking, as well as maybe thinking about having more signs and more poles they look like barriers in the street, the little white poles that are sticking up. It can be a little jarring until we get used to it. So just, keeping in mind that the more signs, you sometimes have a very short reaction time, especially if it's something that you're not expecting. And I don't know if I think maybe the younger folks coming up, it's maybe easier for them than maybe some of us older folks, but I would like to make sure that as we partner with other cities, and we do that engagement, that because some of this is new, I think we need to have even more robust engagement with the business owners and the residents, and potentially even education when people get their driver's license or whatever, so that they're aware this is coming and this is what you need to look out for. Don't worry about the white flags that you see in the middle of the street. If you hit them, you're going to be okay. Those kind of things. But just a little feedback.
Okay, additional questions or comments? All right, I will just say I'm really glad to see this. You'd be surprised that this is one of the things that I hear a lot about. So especially the signal priority, especially from transit advocates, we hear a great deal of information. So to have a framework put together, as we're doing some of these things that aren't part of transit ways, it's, I think, really good for us to have this in place. And I really appreciate kind of the describing out who does what, and just having that knowledge and understanding, and how we'll make it easier to have the partnerships and easier to have the engagement and all of those different things. So just really appreciate the hard work. All right, turn and see if there's anyone else. Seeing no other questions or comments, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-87.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Tony Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, now we are on to business item 2024-109, which is a Metro Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit Vehicle Lift Purchase. And we have Alicia Vac here to present. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, council members. So I'm here to present a business item 2024-109 for the purchase of vehicle lifts. So the Gold Line BRT project is not constructing a new maintenance building, but we are making improvements to the East Metro Transit facility. So 3 of the vehicle lifts are being replaced to support the addition of 17 more 60-foot buses to the East Metro Transit facility fleet. So the majority of buses that are at this facility are 40 feet, so we are adding quite a few more 60-foot buses, which are larger. So the lifts are being purchased with a multi-vendor cooperative agreement, and they will be installed by a contract that's currently being competitively procured right now. So therefore, the business item in front of you today is that the Metropolitan Council authorized the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract 24P126 with Sterile Coney USA Incorporated for the purchase of 2 parallel platform and 1 3-piston lift for the East Metro Transit facility to support the Gold Line BRT project in an amount not to exceed $665,243.67. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Vento.
I have just one little request that in this document that for the business item, the attachment for the districts and members that are listed that Gail Cedarburg be added for District 11.
Any additional questions or comments?
Not a biggie.
Yeah, no problem. All right, then I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-109.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Tony Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the motion carries. Thank you. And we are on to our final two business items, and they are both related to the E-line. It's business item 2024-114, a contract to purchase ticket vending machines, and 2024-115, a contract award for the purchase of Cubic Smart Card validators. And we have Bob Cassidy here to present. Welcome.
Madam Chair, council members, my name is Bob Cassidy. I am the Revenue Equipment Repair Supervisor with Metro Transit, and I'm here to present two business items. The first, 2024-114. It is for the purchase of 162 ticket vending machines for the Metro E-line. The Metro E-line is currently under construction, or going to be starting construction and going into service in the fall of 2025. We started utilizing the Flowbird ticket vending machines back with the A-line, and they won the requirement with the requirements of the RFP. We've continued to use them on the future Metro lines for off-board payment. With the addition of the Orange line and the D line, they actually upgraded the machine, so it now has a touch screen. It's much easier to use. It's faster transactions, and that is what is currently in this business item. The funding is part of the project 61004 for the E-line, and there are 4 additional BRT or TVMs that are part of 62802, the B line, because they added a shared stop that they didn't have in the original B line. So the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute a sole source contract 24P084 with Flowbird to provide ticket vending machines for off-board fare payments on the Metro E-line in the amount not to exceed $2.8 million.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Cameron.
Thank you. So this, I don't have any specific comments on the Flowbird vending, but I do want to say that I'm excited to see that the E-line project has come to this point. And I know to Councilmember Vento's comment raised earlier, we do care deeply about the businesses that are along the line and are making sure to stay engaged in that process. But it is very exciting to see that construction will happen. There's been a lot of planning put into place around the E-line, and so we're really looking forward to that opening service date when we can start bringing folks across the metro. This is a very desirable line in terms of the places and business districts it stops along, and so we're really excited to see this project move forward.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Okay. Councilmember Carter.
Just a point of curiosity, the number 162, what is that in terms of number of ticket vending machines per station?
It's 2 machines on each side of the street. So it's 4 total for a stop.
All right, and then some backup.
Correct.
All right,
Correct.
thank you. This is exciting.
Thank you, Councilmember.
All right. Additional questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-114.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Tony Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Council members, business item 2024-115 is for the smart card validators for the Metro E-line as well. And these are from a company called Cubic, and they have been used since all the way back to the beginning of the Blue Line. They are the way that customers can tag their go-to cards and board the trains or the buses for off-board payment. This is for 95 total smart card validators, and they are 1 validator per side of the street. So we have the 2 ticket vending machines and then 1 validator for people to tag and board. Again, there will be 4 additional smart card validators for the B line for those same shared stops. And the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to execute a sole source contract 24P111 with Cubic Transportation Systems to provide smart card validators for off-board fare payment on the Metro E-line in the amount not to exceed $1.5 million.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand, because you have the ticket vending machine, then you have the smart card validators. Are the smart card validator is eventually going to replace, way down the line, the ticket vending machines? Because it seems like a little bit of redundancy.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Carter, the reason for the redundancy is the smart card validators cannot take cash or credit payments. So therefore, we would be disadvantaging those customers by not being able to purchase their fare. So that is why we have them on both pieces of equipment on the stations.
Okay, additional questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, then I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2024-115.
Motion to approve?
Moved by Councilmember Chambliss, second by Councilmember Morales. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. And that concludes our business section. You're not allowed to leave. We still have a lot more tonight. But I would say if there isn't objection, then business item 3, the Metro Green Line Aldridge Parsons Joint Venture Extension of Time Change Order, and 6, the City of Minneapolis Transit Advantage Master Funding Grant Agreement go on consent to the council, and the others go consent. All right, very good. Okay. Now we are on to our information items. Our first is intersection mobility and safety study. We have Steve Peterson here. And others.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Brought a whole team here today. This is the intersection mobility and safety study, a 2-year effort that we did, and we did it jointly with MnDOT, and that's what we do in a lot of our highway studies. So we have Michael Corbett, who is the co-project manager, then Paul Morris from SRF, who was one of the consultant leads that helped us through the process. So turn it over to Michael.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, and members of the council here. I'm Michael Corbett. I'm with MnDOT. I've been with the DOT for about 12 years, most recently in the planning and program management group, and I've served as kind of the MnDOT project manager on the study, and I've done that with Steve on a number of other sort of system-wide metro area planning studies. And want to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about here. Just a little bit of background. In 2017, we had done the principal arterial intersection conversion study. That had looked at our non-freeway at-grade intersections, and we were primarily focused on what would be our priorities if we were to look at grade separating some of our interchanges. That mainly looked at delay and crashes. This is an update to that. Obviously, we've changed a little bit of the focus of that due to some of the emerging needs and better data that we have. This is also being, like the previous study and all of our system studies, we use a lot of this information to kind of influence our investment planning as we've got preservation projects coming down the pipeline in our 5 and 10-year capital programs. Also helps to identify regional priorities for the transportation policy plan and helps with scoring against other competitive funding programs like regional solicitation. So, whoops, I think I jumped ahead a slide. No, I didn't. Okay. So here's kind of the universe of all the study locations here. As I mentioned, it's largely the non-freeway principal arterials here. So that's why you don't see 394, for instance, because that's the full limited access freeway. We are trying to look at a number of different things here. Like we've largely been focusing on preservation projects. We haven't been able to do a whole lot of standalone capacity expansion projects, and that hasn't been our investment priority over the last 10 years. We're trying to do the best with what we currently have and just make sure we really prioritize our at-grade intersection safety improvements, as best we can, given the limited funding constraints that we've got. So, as to why we want to prioritize these, these actually at-grade intersections actually account for more than half of our serious and fatal injury crashes. So that is one of our main reasons for focus, obviously, and pedestrian accidents and fatalities have been increasing at a very problematic, alarming rate. And we are really trying to kind of nail that down and get at a lot of the reasons behind that and to help us prioritize that too. And so this study moves beyond sort of just a simple car crashes and automobile congestion and looks at a whole bunch of different other factors related to freight and transit and pedestrian and bicyclist use and things like that. And I think with that, I'll hand it off here to Paul Morris with SRF to kind of talk about the next phase.
Right. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thanks so much for having us to present here. Before we jumped into what we call the needs analysis, or the identification of the intersections to be addressed sort of in the next generation of projects, there was a look backwards to see how similar investments in the past had performed. And so that involved identifying, somewhere in the order of 10 or 12 projects over the last 10 years or so that have been implemented, and then doing some quantitative and qualitative analysis about that. And so one that we've highlighted here is Highway 169 and Highway 41, just south of Shakopee in Scott County. And the numbers there are nothing short of remarkable. The crash rate, has gone from far above the critical crash rate, especially for serious injury and fatal crashes, to, almost nothing. And there's also major savings from a congestion and vehicle delay perspective as well. So very encouraging for that particular location. Certainly encourage you to read the report to get some of the details on some of those other before and after locations. But moving forward into this assessment, what we're really calling this is a needs summary. And so we're not talking at all about solutions. There have been no new designs prepared for these projects. We're only looking at the performance of those locations right now, or at least in recent times, and sort of where are they deficient. And so as the title of the study indicates, the intersection mobility and safety study, we knew that there was going to be mobility and safety measures. And as Michael mentioned, in phase one of this work conducted about 5 to 7 years ago, those were really the main things. However, as we started working with our stakeholders, we met with representatives from all 7 counties and several of the cities and some other interest groups. It was very apparent that that wasn't enough. And so there needed to be an understanding of transit issues at these locations, as well as multimodal and pedestrian needs. And so the two additional measures were added sort of midstream in the project, but I think really brought this life. So the multimodal and equity box, you can see, used the SPACE tool. This is something that MnDOT already had in place, and really was an efficient way to bring in several items related to the demographics of those locations and some of the transportation needs of those communities. The one I think we're also very excited about is the transit passenger delay. We had heard loud and clear there was a need to understand sort of how do these intersections interact with transit and are they causing problems? But that had never really been done at scale before. And remember, there are 500 locations. And so, there has to be some way to do that across all those. And so we met with representatives from Metro Transit's data analytics team. And they shared with us they had kind of been working on an experimental measure to look at transit delay at intersections. And so they had very high resolution data on how long the buses had to wait and how many passengers are on the buses, but it had never really been used before. And so we were really honored that we were able to sort of bring that data into like a real world application for the first time. I should note that the Metro Transit's data did also include several of the suburban providers, including Metro Transit, Plymouth, and Southwest. MVTA was not included. However, we also coordinated with MVTA and were able to bring their data to make sure we were getting the full Metro coverage. So this is a map showing the results of the analysis here. You can see the numbers on the screen, but those were categorized into high, medium, and low need intersections. And so, of course, the thing to remember is it's all relative. And so even the low need or the medium need, they still have needs, but in terms of the context of our overall region, there were those 89 locations that really, rose to the top in terms of having the most significant deficiencies across those categories that I just mentioned. And so here we've just provided the list of the top 20. I think it's worth noting that they're pretty broadly distributed across the region, and so they're not solely concentrated in the inner core. They're similarly not just in the suburban areas. I mean, they're really many different contexts of the region are represented here. And I also expect as you look at this map, you probably won't be terribly surprised. These are locations where we know that there's traffic problems, we know there's safety problem, we know there's multimodal needs. And so while, of course, we don't just want to state the obvious, but we find it helpful that the data sort of backs up an understanding of what we already had of this area. The other thing that was quickly apparent is that a lot of those locations are clustered. And so as opposed to just sort of one-off locations, sprinkled around, many of them form these sort of groups or kind of corridors. And again, probably not a big surprise as you look at these, but you see several highway facilities where you have, a number of high-need intersections right in a concentrated area. And probably the other thing to note here is that this is not, these aren't sort of coming out of the blue. Many of these locations have already been studied by the state, by counties and cities, and so there's already work underway to address those solutions here. So just a few findings from that needs analysis here. There were 90 locations that were identified for that high need category. That was frankly more. When we kind of first set out, folks thought, 40 to 50 is probably a logical number for that. But when we looked at the data, we really couldn't, draw the line at that level because there were major needs all the way down to, again, about that 90 number. And I think that's worth noting for our region. There's also several, over 100 more locations in that medium need. And so while the level of investment there isn't as significant as the high need, I think it's still worth keeping an eye on those locations because there can be some lower cost, high impact projects that can be done there. So the details are documented in the study report. We also provide some implementation details with some recommendations on funding opportunities at the state and federal level to advance projects to address some of these locations. And we also note some of those local studies that have already been underway to identify solutions to these issues. So thank you, and I'll pass to Steve.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And just to round out the presentation, we looked at a lot of the corridor sections and then dug into what made them a high need from a regional perspective, and that's some of the charts you see here, and then matched them up with what are some potential funding programs that those local sponsors could pursue that would best meet the needs of the corridor. So this is one on Highway 13, for instance, and looks at some funding programs and where the needs are based on either the different types of mobility or safety or the space analysis tool. The results of the study are also, maybe most important to you, proposed to go into the TPP, those top locations, not as a specific solution set, but as opportunity areas and for further study. The only ones that would be shown as a specific solution would be the four areas you see on the screen, Highway 1365, Highway 36 and 120 right on the county border of Washington and Ramsey County, and then one Hennepin County and Eden Prairie there on Highway 5. Those four locations exhibited both kind of a high regional ranking, were a local priority when we talked to the cities and counties, and also had done a corridor study to suggest that the grade separation was the right approach for that location. So with that, I'll turn it back to you. And I will note, if you are interested in more of the details, even on the slide deck, there are top 20 maps that we made of the safety and the space tool and the transit delay. And if you want to look at what the top 20 intersections were across any of those criteria, it's fun to look through through that and see how it changes. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, and I also did ask Jen to send out the link to the report, so everybody's got quick access to that. So questions or comments? Councilmember Cameron, then Vento.
So this is really great information. It is incredibly helpful in a number of different processes that the council takes up and that the tab takes up as well. And so one, the key piece for me is that some of these corridors are across jurisdictions. They impact multiple communities. And so you talked a little bit about this and working in partnership to collect the data, but what about reporting back? We have these documents available, but also if there's a deeper dive into the types of incidents that are occurring, in some of these places, it might be more multimodal, and in other places, it's restricted just to single occupancy vehicles. So is that all of that information being reported back to those communities so they can understand the nature of safety issues in their communities?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and members. So we did, the advisory committee, this was the congestion management process technical committee that we have at the council, maybe 30 or 40 members. So we did report all of this back, including those implementation plans. You saw the Highway 13 example, back to our local partners. And in many cases, they're already using the results of the study. One example was MnDOT applied for a Reconnecting Communities grant on Highway 55, Olson Memorial, all the way west to Medina. That was awarded money, but in that application, they said, okay, we were a high regional priority. We should get some planning money to further study the issues on the corridor, and that was one successful pursuit. So I guess to answer your question, we are reaching back out to our local partners with these results. So thank you.
Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this presentation. My previous district included cities, Oakdale, North St. Paul, Maplewood, along the 36-120 corridor, and I had an opportunity on numerous occasions to attend meetings that county and city officials had regarding this. They've been working on it for a long time. So to your question, there is a lot of back and forth and work going on. And in this particular case, one of the county commissioners happens to be on tab, Commissioner Stan Karwoski. But I want to thank you for this. The 36 and 120 is a particularly alarming intersection. It has been exacerbated by in the years since the new bridge over the St. Croix opened. And while that bridge provided a tool for transit for people going back and forth over the river, it really had compounded the traffic situation on 36. So thank you. This is critically important to that area. It's no longer a part of my district, but it's an area that I frequent, and I regularly see scary scenes at that intersection. So thanks.
Councilmember Carter.
Again, also thank you so much for the information for this analysis that will be very helpful moving forward. I just wanted to ask a few questions about the logistics and moving between the slides. Certainly, as you mapped out the high needs, there were 89. And then in the next slide, the top scoring locations numbered 80 down underneath the map. And then finally, when you got to the corridor sections, I'm not sure what that number was, but it appears as though sections may have, or locations may have dropped out once you get to the corridor sections. And I'm not sure that I heard. Could you please share with me how you assessed which locations went into those sections? Were you looking for the concentration, or what were you looking for? I specifically am concerned that 51 and B does not show up there.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Madam Chair and Member Carter. So yeah, it's unfortunate that those numbers look a little bit inconsistent from slide to slide. And frankly, there was a lot of kind of current events that had to be kept up with during the course of the study. So two specific examples, Highway 10 in the cities of Anoka and Ramsey, and Highway 169 in Elk River. were programmed and began construction from the period of time that this analysis began to when the results were published. And so we felt it was important to still highlight that those were high need issues, but they're no longer relevant in terms of sort of advocating for funding at this point. In terms of the corridor sections, basically to become a section, the same facility would have to have at least 2 of the high need intersections. But frequently what happened is that it might, kind of a section of corridor would be bookended by 2 high needs. And then in the middle, it would have a mix of low, medium, and high. And so we simply included all of those because even if some investments were made to address the high need locations, it's likely that those low or medium needs kind of sprinkled in the middle would then become the high needs. And so the key takeaway with that is that if you're going to make an investment or improvements in those corridors, you have to treat it as a whole corridor. And so what we want to caution, the sort of users of this information from is trying to pick those off as kind of one-off situations.
So that doesn't mean that those that were one-offs are not high needs and don't need to be addressed. It simply looks at it from the corridor perspective then. But you do go back and you pick up those high needs in order, hopefully, that were on that top scoring locations list. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. And I think it's also a good reminder that there are those kind of individual locations on the map. You mentioned Snelling and County Road B in Roseville, Highway 5 and County Road 4 in Eden Prairie are good examples in the Century and 120 or Century and 36, where they aren't really part of a bigger corridor, they're just the one location.
So thank you.
All right, additional questions? Councilmember Chambliss?
Thanks. Yeah, this is really good information. I've seen different corridor studies. So this intersection mobility and safety that has some more in-depth pieces to it. Do you have the one-page summaries for the top 10 or 15 for all of those top 10 or 15 or whatever that number is?
We do, yes.
Okay, and is that on the link for our transportation transitway page? Or is that something that we could receive? Or I could request?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair and members. So the link that Jenna sent out has the report. The implementation plans were just getting posted, so when we do that, and you can look at specific corridors, whether it's 252 or others, I'm guessing, but
Yeah.
we can certainly share that with you.
Speaking of 252, Highway 252, I did see that for the crash study that had 3 different intersections that were problematic on the list. So, and I understand that they already had another study and that, there are proposals being evaluated right now for Highway 252. So, because that's in my district and I attend a lot of meetings, it would be very good to get my hands on those one-page summaries. This is very valuable information. And for those projects where they are being studied or are in the process of planning, this information is going to the stakeholders as well, along with their corridor studies and planning materials, or how does that work?
Sure. Madam Chair, members of the council, from MnDOT's perspective, what we are doing, in fact, I sat on a presentation today where Metro District is updating their corridor planning prioritization process, and one of the things that gets you points towards that is being listed as a high need in the intersection mobility and safety study. The other thing we do is our planning group interacts with our project management group and investment planning group and program management group as project managers are scoping projects 5-6 years out and trying to determine if there are any locations within their or within or near their project limits that have a medium or high needs location in there. And then we in turn, actually, my previous role, I was actually managing about $15 to $20 million of sort of spot mobility improvement set aside funding that we would then channel towards various investments over the years. And so, yeah, this system study, along with all our other system studies, play a really important role, at least in MnDOT's investment planning and funding and going towards prioritizing things on the planning side when we're looking which corridors to kind of study next for long-range planning.
Okay, thank you.
All right, additional questions, comments? I have a couple real quick. So just first year before and after analysis was 169 and 41. So I live in Shakopee. So very, very significant project. And to see the number of 5.4 million in annual crash cost savings. And that was a site where there were a lot of fatalities and, you know, it was a very dangerous intersection and it is so much better. But to actually put numbers around it is really helpful. I think the other thing this really highlights is the need to do really good research as we're looking at building out the transportation policy plan and for future iterations of the regional solicitation. Because when these things come together and you have funding and we have new funding sources and we have these different things, where are we going to go? Where should we go as a region? It gives us some really good data to work with. My final thing is I absolutely love the implementation plan one-pagers because just like I said, there's lots of different programs. There's more programs with coming in with the transportation omnibus bill, some of the federal money, and helping these local communities maybe look, you should go look here. And so then my ask will be in a couple of years when we're done with the regional solicitation rework in alignment with the TPP is perhaps, you know, layer some of that on here and say maybe whatever we decide what those categories are. For example, we have a spot mobility program right now, or a category, you know, that these might be the categories you want to consider applying for. I think that would be helpful for some of the counties and cities if they're looking at doing some work down the road. So, yeah, you got me thinking.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, anything additional? All right, well, make sure you guys have access to all the materials. We'll get everything out. But thank you all, and thanks for being here. That was great. On to our second information item is the ridership report. We've got John Harper and Joey Reed here. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. John Harper, Manager of Contracted Transit Service in MTS. And with me, as usual, is Joey Reed, who is the Principal Data Scientist with Strategic Initiatives at Metro Transit. We're here today to present to you the 2024 first quarter ridership. And I think the key message overall today is that we are continuing our healthy ridership increases year over year that we have been experiencing for quite a period of time. And so as we'll drill down into the overall, I'll take care of talking about the overall ridership. And then Joey, as typical, will drill down into a couple of more micro level analyses to share with you. So this slide here shows, once again, in the first quarter of this year, we are ahead of last year. And that increase is 13%, which is a healthy increase year over year. So we are doing well. We are doing well really in nearly all modes, all types of service, which we can share in this slide. This slide shows 24 compared to 23, and you can see that the relative size of each of the types of service are the same. And as a matter of fact, I went back to 2022 to just look at how things were doing back then, and the relative sizes of the colors were the same, with the exception of we have been transitioning our local corridors to BRT corridors, and we've talked in this presentation in previous quarters. We talked about the E-line earlier in a business item. We're making those enhancements. We're really shifting people. Overall, about 63% of our service, 64% of our service is in that local bus arterial BRT segments. As Joey says, it's proof of payment. You can also think of it as a relatively local kind of service network. But anyway, as we've shifted, it's about the same size overall. We've just been shifting from the blue to the green bars in this slide here. As we drill down one level further, want to just point out a couple of items to you. The van pool number, the van pool ridership as a program ridership has gone up and down what you might think of as dramatically as we've done these presentations, but it's a relatively small program and relatively small changes can make a big impact. What has driven this impact of down about a third is in 2023, we had some vans, 15 passenger vans that were serving Consolidated Precision Products. That's I guess an aerospace type business in Bloomington. And they were hiring temps that were located off-site and were using Metro Van Pool as a way to get to and from, commuting from their off-site housing onto the campus. And so those vans went away as that need went away, and so you see the drop year to year. I do want to mention that we just today released an RFP onto the street to enter a new 5-year agreement for Metro Van Pool services with a contractor that includes some streamlined program items, program elements, and we won't share them here, but we can certainly share them with you at a future presentation. Just want to mention it does simplify the program, hopefully making it more attractive to users overall. Want to also point out on this slide that we are now identifying the transit link / micro transit line as we implement our North Minneapolis Metro Transit micro pilot service area. Those kind of naturally go together at this point. And so just so you're aware, about 16,000 rides in the quarter were operated in our microtransit pilot service area. About 36,000 rides were in our transit link service area. And so, and I will say that we have an RFP on the street right now that has been on the street for about 3 weeks to hire a service contractor to continue that microtransit program for us and turn our pilot program into a more full-fledged program across the next few years. And so we will reflect those in, as we move that program forward in future presentations. So I think those are the key points on this slide to identify those items in Van Pool and then the combining of the transit link and microtransit lines. But overall, this is ridership is up otherwise. And as we look at the bus modes, breaking them out as we typically do, the ridership is up in each of the categories. And so we're doing well overall. So as I say, I think the key message here is we're doing well. We have healthy ridership increase year over year, really in all programs in all areas. And with that, I will turn the clicker over to Joey to go down a level into understanding the ridership trends.
Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about ridership return on investment. This is just one way of looking at our ridership and the performance of our system. We do make a lot of investments in our service, in our transportation network overall, but what I'm going to talk about specifically today is in-service hours. So these are the sort of like the time the bus is out there that you can make use of it. You can get on, you can get off, it can take you somewhere. And those are the in-service hours. There are lots of other investments, as I said, non-service hours, including the time it takes to get the bus from the garage to the start of the trip, to get from the end of one trip to the start of another trip, the recovery time at the end of the trip. Those are all non-service investments, as well as safety and security investments, vehicle and station improvements, capital investments, and then basically changes to route shape can be thought of as another sort of investment in our service that doesn't really nor necessarily come out in in-service hours. But in-service hours are changed by changing the number of trips we provide. So if you add additional trips, you would add additional service hours. Extending a route, so I'll give an example of that later. Detours, we have a lot of construction, as we already talked about. It's construction season, and Adam and Brian will be talking more about the impacts that makes on operators. And then changes to speed and reliability. So the work we saw Michael and Derek present, providing a bus lane, for example, can reduce our in-service hours by making transit both faster and more reliable. So we want to know, what kind of ridership do we get for an investment of service? If we look over time, you can see in 2022 in yellow, 2023 in green, and 2024 year-to-date so far in blue. Looking at passengers per in-service hour, this is how we typically measure this return on investment. You can see that, and I'll sometimes refer to that as productivity, how it's commonly known in the industry. So you can see how that return on investment has increased over the years. And it has somewhat of a seasonal pattern, returning again in 2023. The return on investment that we see does vary quite a bit by route class. So light rail, you can see, has quite high return on investment with over 200 passengers per in-service hour so far in 2024, and has been growing over the last few years. Similarly, North Star has had a very high passengers per in-service hour. This shouldn't be surprising. You can carry a lot of people on a North Star train in a single service hour. And as you go down to the next highest capacity service, really a bus rapid transit there, continues to grow in passengers per in-service hour. Compared to commuter express and the local route classes, which have sort of flattened out over the last year as far as productivity growth goes. Let's take a little closer look at the BRT. So for weekdays, I'm going to break this down. So again, we're looking at passengers per in-service hour. So I'm going to show you the components and then the result. In red is the in-service hours, in blue is the rides or passengers. So we're looking at the change since over Q1 of last year, where we see a red line above the zero line. We see an investment in in-service hours. And then the blue is that ridership change since Q1 of 2023. So we've had an increase in in-service hours across all of BRT and an increase in ridership across all of BRT. This is fantastic, of course, and we've been talking about this quite a bit. But the productivity change that has resulted isn't even across the board. We're still seeing productivity gains, so more return on investment per in-service hour on the orange, C, and D lines. That's over weekdays. On weekends, Sundays, we're seeing an increase in productivity across all BRT routes. And Saturday's a little bit more hit and miss, but I think what we're seeing on Sundays and weekends in general is, again, a reflection of the sort of change in travel patterns we've been seeing and we've been reporting on over the last couple of years. An increase in transit ridership middays, evenings, weekends, relative to the peaks that we used to see. North Star commuter rail, we just invested a lot in North Star. So in October 2023, we essentially doubled service. This is a huge investment, and we have seen a return of 25% growth in ridership since that investment. Overall, that ridership hasn't increased as much as the amount of service we put in, so the productivity has dropped. It looks like a lower return on investment. I think that North Star is really interesting because it has a huge capacity, a huge potential to carry people. And I think this is part of a long-term investment in that service that can, looking at just a single quarter year over year isn't telling the whole story. This change just happened and there's a lot of opportunity for growth here. Interestingly, compared to peers who also opened up commuter rail networks or lines in the aughts and teens, we cut back service at the beginning of the pandemic more than most, and we waited much longer to return service to our commuter rail network. It doesn't mean it was the wrong thing to do, but it might explain a slower recovery of ridership on North Star. Light rail, we haven't changed service levels in the last year. That's going to change later this year, hopefully. So productivity is defined essentially, or the change in productivity we've seen in the last year is because of the change in ridership. It looks like Blue Line has been mostly flat on weekdays and a slight decline in ridership quarter over quarter on weekends, whereas Green Line is seeing growth in both the weekday and the weekend. Local, so this is where things I like. I'm excited about this slide kind of because I got 3 stories to tell you. So we have 3 routes here, Route 2 on the left, Route 21 in the middle, and Route 68 on the right. So these are core local routes that sort of show different patterns of what's going on. Ridership on Route 2 has been really robust, and we've responded to that with additional service investment. So we are responding to growth in ridership with more service investment. And what that means is things like moving from 15-minute frequencies to 10-minute frequencies, so making this service much more attractive, expanding the span of 10-minute frequencies, moving those 10-minute services earlier in the day. And these are, as we make those investments, we're seeing returns on those investments, and the ridership continues to grow. So that's very exciting for Route 2. That's one of my favorite old routes. It's also, there's another thing happening on Route 2 coming soon, which is that we'll have to add runtime for construction. So again, construction and detours are one of those things that can increase the amount of in-service hours, but you wouldn't really expect to improve ridership. Oftentimes it has the reverse, right? A longer trip, less direct routing, people don't like that, obviously, so we'll see what happens with that. That is, of course, a temporary change, but we'll be extending the span of 10-minute service earlier in the day as well, so those may offset each other. And a lot to look forward to on the 2. Route 21, over the last year, we improved frequency to St. Paul to every 15 minutes, which I took advantage of today, and extended the route to France Ave on the west side. So both of those, improving frequency and extending the route, increased the amount of in-service hours. And you can see that's a very large investment of in-service hours we made year over year. Ridership has grown, but like North Star, the ridership hasn't grown as fast as the investment has happened, so we see a little bit drop in that return or productivity. A lot of this investment is in anticipation of the opening of Beeline. So this is a different reason or a different type of investment that we make. And that investment, Beeline is going to be another form of investment with the off-board fare payment, wider stop spacing, faster trip times, and longer spans of frequent service. So I anticipate, as with our other arterial BRT routes, some really great ridership growth on Beeline coming up. And then Route 68, some fairly minor changes that resulted in some pretty minor decrease in service hours. but potentially improvement in the usability of the route. So one of the branches was rerouted to provide better access to a local attraction, I guess, a shopping center. And the route times were adjusted to be more consistent. So that makes it easier to use the schedule. It makes it easier to access the destinations you want to reach. And so without any real change in investment, we've seen a continued growth in ridership on Route 68. All right, with that, again, I want to remind you that this is really only one measure of success for us, right? Ridership isn't the only thing we're out there to do. High ridership per service hour isn't the only thing we're trying to do. But we do see the highest productivity or return on investment for those high capacity, high frequency services, especially the all-day services like light rail and BRT. And both of those have seen great growth on weekends. And it's a little sort of, it can take a while to see a return on investment in transit. And, you know, we're still seeing, like, I think what I would say is a return to transit ridership or return to mobility. So it'll be interesting to see how these trends continue forward. And again, we have a lot to look forward to this year and into the next year. So the Network Now concept plan coming this summer will help guide more of these investments in service hours, as well as other types of investments that I mentioned before. And then we're preparing for Gold Line, B Line, and E Line all opening next year. So it's going to be a really big year for us. And I think we get to see how these investments are going to play out. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Questions or comments from council members? I would just say, it's good news all around. I mean, at least it's nice to see everything coming together, and I do appreciate it being tied to kind of the story side of things of what does this actually mean. And I think that's really helpful as we're looking at everything. And but yeah, very good. That's very nice to see.
Thank you very much.
All right. On to our next information item. It's the quarterly service changes and workforce update. We've got Adam Harrington, Brian Funk, and Alyssa Howard here to present. Welcome.
Welcome, Madam Chair, council members. We're going to keep the good news train going here, I think. And we'll get started. Adam's going to advance our slides, but today we're going to provide you with a briefing on some workforce metrics and some updates in that regard. Alyssa will provide an overview of the workforce task force, and then Adam will take care of our June service improvements. And so, like I've done on a customary basis, quarterly come in and be able to provide some information about how we're doing for attracting and retaining talented staff. So next slide. When it comes to bus operators, we're still on the upward trajectory, and so this is good news. One of the themes that I'll mention today is this council well knows that we reached agreement with ATU. This group, full council, approved that contract at the end of February, and it's starting to pay dividends. And so we've continued to have a high interest in a number of our positions. Here showing the bus operators, we're essentially bumping up against our target for our current service levels, which is good news, but we're in an expansion and a growth mode. And so we're going to continue to do everything we can to be hiring. That's evident by 55 people as of last week who were in training. So that's really good news going into the summer and the fall, with 289 additional individuals who are in various stages of the hiring pipeline. And so the teams that manage and orchestrate all this are working really hard. Right now, we're actually making arrangements to do more frequent classes so that we don't have candidates dropping out because of waiting for the next class. Of course, there's only so much throughput that you can have to make sure that the training is meaningful and you have the right ratio of students and instructors, but I'm really proud of the work that the team is doing to continue to advance this. And so as we talked about last fall and again in the spring, trying to really work and better understand where our attrition is happening and what we're doing to be able to retain people. I'll say that, the good news is that, a lot of people are staying within the company, but they're moving out of the bus operator role. And so that's something that we'll continue to study through the workforce task force. For people that were just recently hired this year, the largest category gets chalked up to general resignation, and that can mean a number of different things, but we know that the job can be a lot to manage, and so it's something that we're working on to make sure that we both set people up for success through training, but that we're also realistic when people are very early in their time about what to expect driving the bus for us. And so we're currently hiring for full-time and part-time weekend and holiday positions here going into the summer. Next slide. Train operator front is doing pretty well. Also, you can see the sort of orange line of where we were talking last year. We were not in a great spot. We were just getting our legs under us when it came to hiring external candidates, and so that's working out to work out really well. We started a next class just this week. We have 5 people who are in our commercial learners permit program. They'll be joined by as many as 9 more candidates for next week when they start working on their commercial driver's license and then transition over to their rail-specific training. So they'll join 11 people who are working on their train operator training right now, who should be done in June. All systems are looking really good to improve frequency for a portion of the schedule coming up in August. And so in June, again, we'll maintain our 15-minute service, but as Adam's team and my team continue to work out the details, we're looking at improving that frequency with the August service changes, which is great news. And then here's a snapshot of our maintenance staffing. And so these are highlighted by sort of the division groupings. And so the top is our bus area. And on the far right, I tried to show the change since we started to review this slide back in November. And you can see that on the whole, we're a net positive. Things are looking good. But what I'm most excited about is what has not yet shown up on this screen. And so just a couple of facts from our human resource partners that they shared with me this morning. When we think about applications, since the new wage rates went into effect, a new marketing campaign and word of mouth and outreach has really stepped up. For example, the bus and light rail mechanic technicians last year in the months of March, April, and the first week of May, we received a total of 21 applications. This year, we received 80, and so that's a very good marked increase. Another tough to fill technical position is our signals technician in the light rail systems area. Last year, that same March, April, first week of May time period, we had received 13 applications. This year, 43. And so this is, again, really good news, and that trend seems to be continuing across a number of areas. It's optimistic for us, and as Leslie and I, work with our finance group and think about what can we do in the future. We've already started making some plans in specific areas to create additional positions so that if we're able to overhire or move things through in a budget amendment to be able to grab talented individuals, we can go ahead and do that. And then real quickly before I hand it off to Alyssa, in the bus mechanic area, in all of 2023, we hired 6 new technicians coming out externally. It's not very many, but already this year we've hired 5, and so we're on track. We have about 4 more right now that are sort of passing that background stage that should be starting with us, and so we really view this as things are starting to come together. It's because of both a focused effort, but then, as I mentioned at the outset, the commitment that the council made to improving those wages, and then our team being able to turn that into results. So thank you for that, and then I'll hand it over to Alyssa.
Great, thanks, Brian. So I'm coming back with an update on our workforce task force. At our last update around our workforce, we talked about all the work that we needed to do to staff up to the levels and deliver the service that we need in the region. And while we're seeing a lot of these early returns on the contracts, we know that that's not the only work that we need to do to improve our workforce. So we did launch our workforce task force on March 5th, and our current focus right now is building our transit-wide hiring plan. This is aligning setting our priorities transit-wide to really meet the needs and the HR capacity. Our HR team here at the council is at full capacity and has a backlog of positions. This helps us identify what our priorities are by quarter for the rest of 2024 and anticipate our 2025 hiring needs, so we can make sure that the most critical vacancies are assigned to the first available HR representative. We're also working to establish work groups that will focus on workforce planning, recruitment, retention, and employee engagement. And we would plan to bring you back some more information at the next quarterly update on some of the ideas. Some of this may be the early returns on what we're seeing in operations from the contract improvements and from some piloting some hiring initiatives. And we're also talking about identifying some opportunities to modify our existing policies around our hiring and our retention, the practices that we use within transit, and then the business processes that we're using that can really help support and accelerate our workforce growth, which will allow us to more rapidly expand the service that we need in the region. So we'll look forward as that group continues to work. Again, it's only been about 2 months that we've gathered that group together, and we know we have a lot of work in front of us, but we'll provide you an update at the next quarterly update here. And with that, I'd like to transition it over to Adam, who will dive into some service level improvements.
Great, thank you. So this is a familiar chart to you all, hopefully, and it's just representing our incremental growth in the scheduled service that we're providing to our customers for this June pick coming up. And you'll see we've topped off the 90% mark in our BRT and local service when we compare to where we were in 2019. So that's a good sign. All the work that you've heard about helps us get to that point for the June pick. And one of the early bullets was the change of the extra school service that happens this month too. So while even though we're taking those extra trips out for the summer and they'll come back again in August, we still are making some incremental adds with this June pick. So there are 21 routes with schedule changes overall. We do have some good news stories where we're adding service that's not related to construction, but we have a bunch of service changes that are related to construction, and some of those are the short-term pain, long-term gain for us, as you hear about our work on Gold Line and E Line and B Line coming up, and that's all good news that's we're working towards. So we've got some service adds here that you see on the screen. We continue to work on improving how we schedule our work for our bus operators, whether it's trying to right size the travel time so it's a little bit more accurate or trying to adjust the recovery time. And we have a few things in the works that, a couple of that are temporary for Green Line, which should really improve both the operator work, but also the reliability of our service. And oftentimes those things go hand in hand. How well does that work get scheduled for the operator so they don't get behind and it's a cumulative effect? So a couple highlights, Route 25 serving Northeast Minneapolis and on up to New Brighton and ending at Northtown and Blaine. For a number of trips prior to 2022, we had a lot of service in the middle of the day operating in this corridor, and we're happy to bring midday service back as far north as Silver Lake Village between downtown. So we'll have a regular hourly schedule both directions throughout the day there. So that's a nice return to start building. Route 32, this is a future candidate for BRT in this corridor operating between Robbinsdale and Rosedale along Lowry Avenue. And with some regional solicitation fund, we're leveraging that resource to improve the frequency of this route up to every 20 minutes between 11 a.m. and 6 p.m. 7 days a week. Right now, it's every 30 minutes, 7 days a week, and is part of our free fare pilot program, which will go to the end of the year. You can see the chart there that shows how our ridership is climbing or has climbed since then. So we'll continue to monitor that service as well. But one of the big impacts at the same time that all this is happening, Hennepin County is doing a major rebuild of Lowry Avenue between Johnson and University Avenue. And so you can see here the segment that's under construction this year, 2024, University Avenue over to Central. We're on detour a couple different ways depending on trips that serve Edison High School. And that's going to transition again over to the other side of Central Avenue this year. Then finally, the last segment to the west. So we'll have a number of disruptions, but we're hoping that additional frequency and our coordination with our operations partners at Hennepin County will keep our buses rolling reliably. So It's a good news story here in the end. Here's the list of the construction impacts. Some of them you may be familiar with already that have been underway. And so we're continuing to work with not only the roadway partners who might own that project or our own crews to best navigate those situations, but I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of work going on, and that'll mean some good improvements in the end, but that means some difficult situations for some customers where it might be a little bit longer travel time, but we're trying to build our schedules so that it's reliable for them and for our operators. So a lot of information and schedule changes coming out. And in fact, the last slide here is those schedules are available on the trip planner for customers right now. So if someone is trying to plan a trip on our trip planner in the future, they can see what that would look like. And then our full schedules will be available on Friday, May 17th, where people can get the full glimpse of it, and all that information will be at metrotransit.org. So with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Okay, good, thank you all. Questions or comments? Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, the free fare pilot program, is that the student program?
I'll go back here. Madam Chair, Councilmember, no, this is one of the pilot routes that we were directed to develop a free fare pilot program following the legislative session. So this is one of two routes that we selected to do a pilot program with. So all rides are free on this route and on Route 62 on Wright Street.
Right, additional questions or comments? All right, well, I do have one, but I'd say thank you for, having the good news train keep going. That was really nice. My question was actually on the workforce task force. Are you involving in that group like people throughout the organization? Because when you're talking about retention and employee development, are you getting feedback from different, from people working in supervisor or manager positions at the bus garages and things like that?
Chair, members of the committee, the Workforce Task Force, as we've gotten started, has really asked the directors to go back and have conversations with their groups. I'd also mentioned through our town hall participation and our Great Workplace Project, which is a member of that committee. Those groups have connections into all of our locations, both physically visiting and making sure that we're mentioning these projects when we're out at the locations, so that employees at all levels, supervisors at all levels, have opportunities to provide their feedback. And then I'd also just add that our HR partners that are part of that task force are also using the hiring plan, for an example, as something that they're testing out and want to do throughout the council so that it benefits beyond Metro Transit. But we're starting with Metro Transit since we have some immediate needs.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, final call for questions. All right, thank you all. All right, we have one more information item, and I know we're getting close to 6, but we want to finish this one up if we can. So it's the FTA semi-annual report. We have Trina Bolton and Ashanti Payne here to present.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Council, and committee members. Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. And with me this evening, I have Trina Bolton, who is our team lead in the Small Business Unit. And we are here to present on our first half FTA DBE report. As you know, this is part of our requirements relative to ensure that we continue to receive funding from the FTA and USDOT. And with that, Trina is responsible for coordinating the activities both across divisions and departments and putting this report together. And I'm going to turn it over to her.
Perfect. Thanks, Ashanti. Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, council members. So this is the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Report. So the DBE funding is with federal dollars. It's construction, architectural, and engineering, and professional and technical contracts. The annual goal is set every 3 years, and it's currently 2024 to 2026, and it's 13.4%. The project-specific goals are assigned by small business staff in my unit. The report utilization to the FTA is semi-annual, so it's June and December. And then the achievement is against awarded goals, so awarded contracts. So this is the DBE utilization for this reporting period. Again, it is from October 1st, 2023 through March 31st, 2024, so that 6-month period. So the achievement in total dollars was $94 million. The amount to DBE primes was almost $2 million, $1.9 million. The amount to non-DBEs and DBEs was 35.6 million, and then the amount to DBE subcontractors was 7 million, totaling 9 million total to DBE firms this reporting period. We did have a shortfall and only achieved 9.6%, and that was primarily due to the largest contract in this awarding period, which was the fare collection system upgrade. So that was 26.6 million. It was a sole source, and there was no DBE participation. The other item to keep in mind is we did have a shortfall last June. It was 6.5%, and in the December report, we achieved 21.7, totaling 20% for the year. So typically, the trend is there's a lot more awards in the second part of the year, and hopefully that's the case this year. So this is the DBE awards contracts by gender and ethnicity for the June report. Again, the typical trend is the higher spend with the 9 minority females for 5.4%, Asian Pacific American 2.1%, Native American 624,000, Hispanic American 267,000, and then Black American 517,000. And then this is a total of DBEs by ethnicity and location for the June report. Again, the females had the highest number of contracts, and then the Black Americans had 8 contracts. And again, as I mentioned, the fare collection system upgrade was the highest contract with 26 million. And then there's the Metro B line, which was pretty similar, 26 million. And then the Blue line was a rail project with 7.3% participation. And there are lower amount of DBE firms for rail, which is why the goal and the commitment was lower. And then here are just a couple success stories. So one DBE firm was awarded 2 contracts, the 2 prime contracts, and then there was 5 contracts awarded to Asian Pacific firms. That was a higher amount. The December report only had about 300,000 to Asian Pacific firms, and then this report had a larger amount of the 2.1 million. So this is just some of the process improvement. We've been doing targeted outreach, meet and greets for larger projects. The Mentor Protege program is continuing to go on. OEO is doing engagement, so we're meeting with all the different departments. 2 of my counterparts are meeting with departments right now about our SIM process and goal setting so that everyone understands what we go through to set a goal on a contract and what they need to do to help us achieve that. And then once that is complete, myself and my other counterpart will be doing trainings with everyone in the different departments about awards to end of contracts, so what we do to monitor the contracts and then do the closeout. We have the engagement and development unit, the data teams, and then there's the Thrive Equity Fund. So we did have a firm awarded just in 2024, and that is Project Solutions. So they are offering MCUBs free contractor training and business consultation support services. So there's 5 or 4 classes that will be offered quarterly, and those include construction safety, how to estimate and bid on council projects, how to respond to a council request for proposal, RFP, understanding the process of change orders, and then one-on-one business consultation services. So not everyone will have the same needs, so then they could reach out to that firm and get assistance in the ways that they need it. The next thing is the small business equity assessment. So we've hired Strong and Starlight Consulting, and they're doing an assessment of inclusion activities that include like our goals, our objectives, what we do for purchasing practices, and we're trying to strengthen our program. So that's what that assessment will do. And then finally, there's the diverse spend plan policy, and it requires the departments and divisions to forecast their spend and develop a plan of how they will utilize MCUBs in their departments. So those are kind of the upcoming things. And with that, questions?
Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the encouraging report. And I realize that we are under our goal, but the number is never gonna be 1-for-1. And hopefully we end up doing better at the end of the year. I was glad to hear you say that you are working on a diverse spend plan policy and working with the departments to understand their plans. Where would you say that process is? Are we in a place and time now where in working with the departments, we're able to see a forecast that gets us to beyond our goal?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Carter, right now the diverse spend plan policy is going through the policy review process and team. It has gone to OGC at this point and continuing on that process.
Thank you. And I should have said, I understand you're working on the policy. Is the work actually happening? Are we working with departments already to anticipate or to have them share their anticipated contracts in such a way that we are able to foresee? Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. We are not there yet.
Okay.
And it is our true belief that this policy, once it's implemented, will put us in a great position to be able to do that. But we are not there yet.
We're looking very forward to that. And thank you for the update. Would love to hear when it's in process and see that coming forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Morales.
Thank you very much for all the information. I just had one question. Looking at the percentages, it basically shows that 45% of our DBE contractors are Caucasian. And I've been seeing a trend where a lot of contractors are changing to WMBE contractors to be able to get these contracts, whether it's state, federal, county, local funds, because they are at a disadvantage if they don't have a WMBE, DBE contractor for these projects. Is it a typical trend for us to see 45% of our DBE numbers being Caucasian females?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Morales. Recently, I would say yes, but historically, both here at the council and just our regional partners and nationally, it's typically around 80%. So that number has gone down over the last few years here at the council.
Any additional questions or comments? Councilmember Chambliss.
Okay, I am looking for the words, but I think you are breaking in the business item notes, you're breaking the percentages down by minority and non-minority DBE goals, right? Let me see where that is. It's called race conscious and race neutral.
Right.
Can you talk about that and how that relates to his question? And I had the same question as Mr. Morales.
Sure. Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, I dislike that term because it is misleading. Race conscious versus race and gender neutral just means that where we have requirements for a DBE goal, that means we're race conscious. And race and gender neutral means when you get participation, even though there wasn't a goal set or a requirement to incorporate DB participation, but it's not specific to racial or ethnic categories versus versus women.
Okay, and then my other question is, when we have that 50% non-minority, have we researched what that's doing to close the racial equity gap? Or do we even have a goal for that?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, I'm going to leap out there and hope that I understand your question. First, we, in our DBE program, we do not have separate goals or targets that are based on gender or race. However, it is important from an equity standpoint to track that information and understand where we are, where our dollars are being spent, and to try and get at some of those questions. One of the things that we found out through this latest MCUB report is that, you know, when you have you spend large amount of dollars in the consulting area, IS, it brings in a more diverse population of small businesses. And one of the reasons we believe that happens is, contrary to construction, there isn't a large capital need. You don't need a piece of a paver or a crane or equipment. It is your education, training, and experience. So those are things that we need to understand. Those are things in getting to a place to where we can plan and understand where we're spending our federal dollars versus our state dollars that will help us answer that question that you just posed.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose that might be part of the targeted outreach as well. I mean, once you get all those information and your strategies aligned. But having this particular type of report is very helpful. I think it has a little bit extra than what we're used to seeing, so I like seeing all the detail and the breakdowns that is presented.
Yes, and I'll just add that targeted outreach. One of the things that we realized back in '21, we were not seeing any participation from Black women and Hispanic women-owned businesses. So we did a targeted effort and outreach to those businesses, and we were able to see that effort manifest itself in our reporting and in our outcomes.
Councilmember Tyrone Carter. Then
My question was similar. How do you arrive at the total universe of potential DBE contractors? Because there's the total universe of them, and there's the amount that actually apply and receive the contract. So how do you determine what the total universe of potential DBE contractors are within our given area?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Carter, we have a DBE directory that lists all of the DBE firms that are certified in the state of Minnesota. And actually, the Metropolitan Council, we host that DBE directory on behalf of our Minnesota Unified Certification Program partners, which include City of Minneapolis, Metropolitan Airports Commission, and Minnesota Department of Transportation. So Trina may have a better idea of the number. I think there's like 800 to 900 in our universe. Mm-hmm. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. And so that's the total universe. We also want to understand how that's broken out in terms of the scope of services those 800 to 900 firms provide.
Councilmember Tony Carter.
Thank you. You know, I just wanted to ask for a little clarity with respect to the goals that we are setting. Here, we're looking at percent of contracts awarded to DBEs and the breakout of DBEs. The study that we're doing or that we're participating in with the state of Minnesota is about availability. Those who have the ability to do business with us and how we're doing comparative to availability of those contractors. And can you just confirm for me that that is happening, that we're on track toward that? I don't know if it's generally availability study, but toward what includes an availability study, that being a little different, than what we're looking at here, which is the percentage of our contracts that generally go to DBE contractors. The availability study really being kind of helpful to us in understanding that gap and how we are, in fact, closing the gap between those who are available to do the business with us and the work that we do with them. I am wrapped up in the statement I just made. Would you make it better? Thank you.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I know.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Carter. Yes, we are participating in the state disparity study. And part of a disparity study includes an availability analysis, which, as you stated, looks at the landscape or the universe of available businesses and, excuse me, compares it to our utilization of those businesses.
You did so much better than I did. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and there is a measure of what we should expect in terms of given the availability analysis, and wherever we're short, that's the disparity or the disparity index. I would also say that there was a good portion of that, I would say a very good analysis of that when we did our 3-year goal last year with the University of Minnesota. So we have a good understanding of where we are and where we think the disparities are with the council.
And we'll be updated on that as well. Thank you.
Okay, any additional, Councilmember Carter?
I just want to say thank you for the job you do. Thank you for the job you do, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else. All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And if there's nothing else from the committee, we're adjourned.